There are stories that are only whispered in the dark, secrets that are only spoken when no one is listening, and mysteries that, once uncovered, will change your life forever? Welcome to FOGMAN Stories. If you're fascinated by true ghost stories, eerie supernatural encounters, and unexplainable paranormal events, you've come to the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because every week, we bring you stories that will send chills down your spine. Tonight, I will tell you about haunted stories that few dare to speak of. Abandoned houses with footsteps that echo through empty halls. Spirits trapped between worlds. And terrifying encounters that force people to flee in fear. But beware. Once you start listening, you won't be able to stop. Are you ready? Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and step into the darkness with me. Let's begin. Story 1. Where do I even begin? This was just the first in a series of strange occurrences that happened to me and my family when we moved into our new home in Willow Creek, Wisconsin. The place seemed pleasant enough, quiet, surrounded by towering trees, and with a charming old-world feel. We had heard nothing negative about the house or its past. But that changed quickly. One night, my parents and I were abruptly woken by a loud crashing sound echoing through the house. It was my school lunchbox, a heavy, hard plastic one with a flip-top lid, tumbling violently down the wooden staircase. The noise was deafening in the stillness of the night, making our hearts pound. We assumed it was one of our two cats knocking it over. But then we realized something eerie. Both of them were curled up at the foot of my parents' bed, their tails twitching at the sudden commotion. My bedroom was upstairs, 2 rooms away from the staircase, and there was absolutely no way my lunchbox could have fallen on its own. I distinctly remembered setting it beside my bed after school, and to add to the mystery, my bedroom door was shut. After 6 years, we still never figured out how that lunchbox managed to take a tumble in the dead of night. But as more inexplicable events unfolded, we came to believe that something, or someone, other than us was living in that house. It started subtly, small things disappearing only to reappear in strange places. The sound of whispers in the hallway when no one was there. Shadows darting across the room in the corner of our eyes. At first, my parents brushed it off, saying it was just our imagination. But as time went on, even they couldn't ignore the odd occurrences. One evening, I was alone in the house, studying in my room. The floorboards creaked outside my door, slow, deliberate steps. Thinking it was my mom or dad, I called out. No response. The footsteps continued, moving toward my room. My stomach twisted in knots. Summoning the courage, I yanked the door open. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I rushed downstairs, only to find my parents in the living room, watching TV, oblivious to what had just happened. When I told them, they exchanged glances but dismissed it, saying it was likely just the house settling. But deep down, I knew something unseen was roaming our halls. The most terrifying encounter happened one winter night. A chilling wind howled outside as I lay in bed, struggling to sleep. Then, I heard it, a faint scratching at my bedroom door. At first, I thought it was the cats. But when I called out their names, the scratching stopped abruptly. Moments later, the sound of my doorknob rattling sent shivers down my spine. Something, was trying to get in. Frozen in fear, I pulled the covers over my head, hoping it was just my imagination. But then, I heard my closet door creak open. A cold rush of air swept through the room. Holding my breath, I peeked out. The closet door was slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness inside. I never slept with my closet door open again. After that night, things escalated. Strange noises filled the house at odd hours, low murmurs. The sound of furniture shifting. Knocks on the walls. One evening, my mom was alone in the kitchen when she felt a cold breath against her neck. She turned around, expecting to see my dad standing there. But no one was there. She bolted out of the kitchen, pale and shaken. Even my dad, the eternal skeptic, started to acknowledge the strange happenings. He swore he saw a shadow dart past the hallway mirror late at night. We all began sleeping with our doors locked. The basement was always unnerving. The air was thick, damp, and had a strange, musty smell that never seemed to go away. One evening, while retrieving some old boxes, my dad heard heavy breathing behind him. He turned, expecting to see one of us. But the room was empty. Then, the light bulb above flickered and went out, plunging the basement into darkness. My dad scrambled up the stairs, swearing he heard footsteps chasing after him. After that, we all avoided the basement unless absolutely necessary. Over the years, we heard stories about our house, whispers from neighbors, old newspaper clippings. There had been an accident decades ago. A young boy had fallen down the very staircase where my lunchbox tumbled that night. Some said he never left. Even now, I still wonder, was he the one moving things? Whispering in the hall? Standing outside my door on those sleepless nights? We moved out years later. But to this day, we still talk about that house. My parents still get uneasy when I bring it up. I don't know if we were haunted or if it was just an overactive imagination. But one thing is certain. There was something in that house that was beyond explanation. And sometimes, the things we cannot see are the things we should fear the most. Story 2. It was one of those cold, damp nights where the air seemed to carry a weight of unease. I had been walking home from a small gathering at a friend's house. Taking the usual route along an old, deserted road that most people avoided after dark, there was something about that stretch of pavement, a kind of eerie silence that clung to it like a thick fog. But I had walked this road countless times before and never encountered anything out of the ordinary. On the way, I passed by an old, abandoned church, street, Elsbeth's Chapel, a structure with fading pinkish walls that locals referred to as the Rosewood Church. Over the years, rumors had swirled around this place. People claimed that if you walked by it late at night, something would follow you. I never paid much attention to ghost stories, so I walked past without a second thought. As I crossed in front of the church, however, an inexplicable sensation prickled the back of my neck. It was the distinct feeling of being watched, like unseen eyes boring into me. I shook off the unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then, just as I stepped further down the road, I heard it, soft, rhythmic footsteps echoing behind mine. I slowed my pace slightly, my ears straining to pick up the sound. The footsteps stopped. The night was still again, except for the rustling of the leaves in the cold wind. I took a deep breath and started walking again. A few seconds later, the footsteps returned. They were light, almost playful, as if someone was deliberately matching my steps. A creeping sense of dread began to rise in my chest. I turned my head slightly to the side, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever, or whatever, was behind me. But there was nothing. Just the empty road stretching behind me. The distant streetlights barely illuminating the cracked pavement. Then, I heard it. A soft humming. Like a child singing a lullaby. The sound sent a chill straight through my bones. It was faint, almost distant, yet unmistakable. My heart pounded as I picked up my pace, determined to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever was lurking in the dark. But the humming persisted. It followed me. Just as I was about to break into a sprint, I felt it. Something tapping on my shoulder. A single, deliberate tap. My breath hitched, and a cold wave of fear crashed over me. I turned my head in terror. But there was no one there. My instincts screamed at me to run. And I did. I sprinted the rest of the way home, not daring to look back. When I finally reached my house, I fumbled with the keys, my hands trembling. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, securing every window in the house. My chest heaved as I tried to catch my breath. "Mom?" I called out, hoping she was home. Silence. Just as I turned to head upstairs, a loud pounding came from the front door. My stomach twisted into knots. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. The pounding continued, slow and rhythmic. I backed away from the door, my pulse racing. After a few agonizing moments, the sound stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness. Shaking, I made my way upstairs, slipping beneath the covers of my bed, hoping that whatever had followed me home had decided to leave. But then, I heard them. Light footsteps padding across the floor downstairs. My body went rigid. Someone, or something, was inside the house. I forced myself to breathe slowly, straining to listen. The footsteps moved closer, now climbing the stairs. My bedroom door stood closed, but I could hear the doorknob rattling. A fresh wave of terror coursed through me as I stared at the door, frozen in place. Then, the door creaked open, and standing there was my mother. But something was wrong. She looked pale, almost unnaturally so. Her clothes, which were usually dark-colored, were now stark white, as though they had been bleached. Her expression was unreadable as she stepped into the room. "I was calling your name," she said, her voice distant. "Come with me." I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to refuse. Something about her wasn't right. My mother never wore white. And if she had been calling me, why hadn't I heard her voice before now? "I'm really tired," I managed to say. "Can we talk in the morning?" She tilted her head slightly, studying me. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back down the hallway, disappearing into the darkness. A deep unease settled in my stomach. I needed to know what was going on. Summoning my courage, I crept out of bed and tiptoed downstairs. But when I reached the bottom, I found the house empty. No sign of my mother. No sign of anyone at all. The realization hit me like a freight train. She had never been home. The next morning, when my real mother returned, I told her everything. Her face paled as she listened. And when I was done, she shook her head. "I never came home last night," she whispered. A cold dread settled over me. Whatever had been in my house that night, it wasn't my mother. From that moment on, I never doubted the stories about Rosewood Church. Whatever lurked there had followed me home, and I had no intention of ever walking past it again. Story 3. You ever have one of those moments where something happens, And no matter how much you think about it, you just can't explain it? Yeah, this is one of those stories. It still gives me chills when I think about it. So, let me take you back to that night and tell you exactly what happened. It was late, probably around midnight. The house was quiet, and I was passed out in the recliner in our living room. You know that kind of sleep where you're half aware of your surroundings but too comfortable to wake up? That was me. The warm glow from the lamp, the muffled hum of the television, it all felt safe. Until the door burst open, and my little sister, Kelsey, and her best friend, Ellie, came running in like they had seen a ghost. "Why were you in the woods?" Kelsey practically screamed, her breath ragged. I jolted upright, groggy and confused. "What are you talking about? I was right here." Ellie shook her head furiously, her eyes darting around the room like she expected something, or someone, to be there. "No, we saw you, out there. You were standing in the woods, staring at us." My skin prickled. That wasn't me. Kelsey and Ellie exchanged glances. Their faces drained of color. I could see the sheer terror in their expressions. And for the first time that night, my heart began to race. "Tell me everything," I demanded, my voice lower than before. Kelsey and Ellie had been outside on our porch, just talking and giggling like teenage girls do. They were getting ready to head inside when they both felt it, a weird shift in the air. Like the atmosphere had thickened around them. Instinctively, their gazes turned toward the woods. And that's when they saw her. A girl, standing between the trees, just beyond the reach of the porch light. She wasn't moving, just staring. And the worst part? She looked exactly like me. At first, we thought it was really you, Kelsey admitted, voice shaking. Same hair, same hoodie, same everything. But then, she spoke. Ellie swallowed hard. She told us to come with her. She said she had something to show us. My stomach dropped. "And you listened?" "Hell no," Ellie snapped, shaking her head. Something about her was off. Kelsey's lip trembled. Her voice, "It was yours." But, wrong. It was deeper. Like something else was speaking through you. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. Doppelgangers. I'd heard of them before. Urban legends. Stories about people seeing themselves. Only for something horrible to follow. Ellie continued. I told Kelsey, "That doesn't sound like Courtney." And when I said that, the thing's face changed. Kelsey shuddered. Her mouth stretched open, like it wasn't made for human speech. And then she said, "Come here, now." The way Kelsey said it, with that same eerie depth in her voice, made my entire body lock up. They had bolted for the house, screaming, while that thing just stood there, watching. By the time we rushed back outside, it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind, made my nerves jangle like a struck piano wire. Something about the encounter didn't sit right. It wasn't just a trick of the eyes. That thing had spoken. It had tried to lure them away. The next morning, I went out to the edge of the woods. The ground was damp from the rain earlier that week, and I noticed something strange. Footprints. Bare footprints, leading out of the woods. But they stopped abruptly, like whoever, or whatever, had been standing there had just vanished. Over the next few weeks, the feeling of being watched never really left. Kelsey swore she kept seeing glimpses of me in places I wasn't. Standing in the hallway when I was outside, walking past her room when I was at work. The moments were brief, always just long enough to register before disappearing. But then, One night, something happened that made me believe her. I had just gotten up for a glass of water. As I stepped out of my room, I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadowy figure at the end of the hallway. It wasn't moving, wasn't making a sound, just standing there, watching. And before I could react, it turned the corner and disappeared. But I hadn't heard any footsteps. A chill ran down my spine. I walked to the end of the hallway, slowly peering around the corner, expecting to see, well, something. But there was nothing. The air was still, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just been there. One evening, I decided to test a theory. I left my phone recording in the living room overnight, hoping to catch any movement or sounds. The next morning, I scrolled through the footage, fast-forwarding through hours of nothing. And then, at around 2:47 a.m., I saw it. A figure stepped into the frame. It was me, or at least, it looked like me. But it didn't move like me. It twitched unnaturally, its limbs too rigid, its head tilting at angles that didn't feel human. It stood there for what felt like forever before finally stepping back into the shadows. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know why it looked like me, or why it wanted Kelsey and Ellie to follow it. But I do know one thing. If they had gone into those woods that night, I don't think they would have come back. Doppelgangers, spirits, something worse. I don't care what name you put on it. But I believe this. When something in the dark calls your name, don't answer. And whatever you do, don't follow it. Story 4. Let me tell you something strange. Something that still gives me chills every time I think about it. This story takes place in the same house where the infamous lunchbox incident happened, yeah. The one that mysteriously tumbled down the stairs on its own. If you thought that was weird, just wait until you hear what happened one particular night. I remember it clearly. It was a regular evening. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was hanging out with my folks in the living room, watching TV, but for some reason, I was feeling more tired than usual. The kind of tired where your body feels like lead, and your eyes just won't stay open. So, I decided to call it a night and head up to my room. Now, I'd gone up and down those stairs countless times before. But that night, the moment I placed my foot on the first step, something felt off. You know that eerie sensation? Like someone is watching you? That was exactly what I felt. Like a pair of unseen eyes burning into my back. I paused, turned around, scanned the room. My parents were still on the couch, focused on the TV, completely oblivious. No one else was there. But that feeling didn't go away. Shrugging it off, I continued climbing. But as I passed the window on the landing, something caught my eye. A glow. At first, I thought it was just headlights from a car turning into our driveway. But it didn't move. It wasn't flickering. It was just there. I stepped closer, pressing my face against the glass. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was a shape, a human-sized, foggy outline standing motionless in the backyard. It had no face, no features, just an eerie, pulsating aura that shimmered in the dark. And the worst part? I could feel it watching me. Not just looking, watching. As if it knew I was there. As if it had been waiting for me. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was seeing things. Looked again. Still there. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I don't know why, but I had this crazy idea that if I spoke to it, maybe, just maybe, it would respond. So, I reached for the window. my fingers brushing against the glass, ready to lift it up. But the moment I made contact, poof, it vanished, like it had never been there. I stood frozen, staring out into the yard, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with something I couldn't explain. I wanted to call out to my parents, to tell them what I had just seen. But I couldn't move. I felt like if I even breathed too loudly, whatever it was might come back. Finally, I forced myself to look away and hurried up the rest of the stairs, slamming my bedroom door shut behind me. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that glowing figure standing there, waiting, watching. And here's the thing. I know what I saw. I know it wasn't a trick of the light. The feeling it left in my gut was real. Something primal. Something that screamed, "You are not alone." Now, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but if I had to guess, I'd say it was the spirit of the previous owner, the woman who lived in that house before us. There were stories about her. Stories I didn't believe back then. But after that night, let's just say I started paying a little more attention. The days that followed weren't exactly normal either. Every time I passed that staircase, I felt something, a heaviness, an unshakable presence lingering in the air. I started hearing faint noises, whispers, creaks in the floorboards when no one was around. One night, I woke up to the sound of something tapping on my window. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. When I finally got the courage to look, there was nothing there, just the backyard, silent and still. But I swear, I could feel something looking right back at me. Then, things started escalating. My mom began noticing odd occurrences, objects being moved, the lights flickering for no reason. One morning, she found all the kitchen chairs pulled out from the table, perfectly aligned, as if someone, or something, had been sitting there in the dead of night. One evening, I was coming home late from a friend's house. The house was dark, my parents already asleep. As I crept up the stairs, I felt that same suffocating pressure, like I was being watched. But this time, it wasn't just a feeling. As I reached the top of the staircase, I heard it, a breath, a slow, deliberate breath right behind me. I spun around, expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing, only the dimly lit hallway stretching behind me. My own breath came out ragged, my skin crawling with fear. I didn't waste another second. I bolted into my room, locking the door behind me. Sleep became a luxury I rarely indulged in after that. The presence in the house wasn't just something I imagined, it was real. And it wasn't going anywhere. One night, I decided to test a theory. I set up an old tape recorder on the staircase and let it run overnight. The next morning, I played it back, half expecting nothing but static. But what I heard made my blood run cold. A voice, faint, distorted, but unmistakably there. It whispered something, something I couldn't fully understand. But one word stood out, leave. That was it for me. I told my parents everything. At first, they thought I was just imagining things. But after all the strange occurrences, even they couldn't deny that something wasn't right with that house. We moved out a few months later, and I never looked back. I still wonder about that glowing figure. Was it warning me? Was it trying to communicate? Or was it something much darker? Something waiting for the right moment? I don't know. But one thing I do know? Sometimes, when you think you're alone, you're really not. So stay aware, keep your eyes open, and never ignore that feeling in your gut. Because you never know who, or what, might be watching. Story 5. You ever wake up in the middle of the night and feel like something's watching you? Maybe even sitting on your chest, pressing down, making it impossible to move? Some folks call it sleep paralysis. Others say it's something much worse. Whatever it is, it's terrifying. I've heard plenty of stories about it, but nothing compares to experiencing it firsthand. And let me tell you, last night was one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life. It was around 4:30 a.m., and I had been tossing and turning for hours. No matter what I did, I just couldn't fall asleep. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of my ceiling fan. Shadows stretched across the walls. And even though I was exhausted, my mind wouldn't shut off. I checked my phone. Battery at 9%. Screen glowing softly in the darkness. Maybe I should just get up, grab a drink of water, and try again. But before I could force myself up, a strange sense of heaviness settled over my body. Finally, exhaustion took over, and I started dozing off. That's when it happened. I felt the mattress dip slightly, like someone had just sat at the edge of my bed. My eyes snapped open, but my body refused to move. A cold wave of fear crashed over me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would explode out of my chest. I tried to turn my head, tried to lift my arms, but it was useless. I was trapped in my own body. Then, a voice, deep, raspy, and right next to my ear, whispered, "Don't fight." I couldn't see anyone, but I could feel them. The weight on my bed grew heavier. My breathing became shallow, my throat tight with fear. Every instinct in me screamed to fight back, to get this thing off of me. I mustered every ounce of strength I had and managed to lift my right hand. I swung blindly at the space beside me, but there was nothing there. That's when the pressure increased. It felt like a ton of bricks had been placed on my chest. My lungs burned as I struggled for air. My mind raced. Was I dreaming? Was this really happening? The voice came again, but this time, it sounded closer, as if someone was right next to my ear. A chill ran down my spine. I could hear breathing, ragged, slow, unnatural. It wasn't mine. The weight on my chest intensified. And for a moment, I thought my ribs might crack under the pressure. I tried again. This time, I managed to move my left hand. Too. Desperation fueled me as I flailed against the unseen force. And then, just like that, it was gone. The weight lifted. My body jerked forward, and I gasped for air like I had been drowning. I scrambled to turn on the lamp beside my bed, scanning the room for any sign of an intruder. But there was nothing. Just me, my racing heart, and the suffocating silence of my bedroom. For the next few minutes, I sat frozen in place. My mind refused to accept what had just happened. My limbs were trembling, my breath coming out in sharp, uneven gasps. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking too much to grip it properly. The glow of the screen barely illuminated the space around me, but I could swear I saw movement, just at the edge of my vision. I turned on my bedroom light. The shadows looked normal again. The bed was empty except for me. Still, the air felt wrong, heavier, somehow, like something unseen had just left. But not entirely. The feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. My mother always warned me about sleeping with my arms crossed over my chest. She used to say it invites bad dreams, that it makes it harder for the soul to stay connected to the body. Maybe she was onto something. Maybe there's more to sleep paralysis than science can explain. The rest of the night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up in bed with every light on. My nerves still raw from what had happened. The rational part of me tried to tell myself it was just my brain playing tricks on me. Just sleep paralysis. A misfire in the process of waking up. But another part of me knew better. The voice. The pressure. The presence. It wasn't just a dream. Morning came, and I still felt shaken. I went about my day as normal. But every now and then, I caught myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the corner of my vision. That night, I avoided my bed until exhaustion forced me back under the covers. I made sure to sleep in a different position, arms at my sides, every light in my apartment left on. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe it really was just my brain playing tricks on me. But deep down, I had a gnawing feeling that whatever visited me that night wasn't just in my head. I don't know if there's a logical explanation for what happened to me. Science says it was sleep paralysis. My gut tells me it was something more. Either way, I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone. If you've ever gone through something like this, I hope you never have to feel it again. And if you haven't, pray that you never do. God bless, and may you sleep peacefully. Story 6. I've got a story for you tonight that will make you think twice before opening any door in the dark. This is a real experience, something that happened to me when I was just a kid. And let me tell you, it still haunts me to this day. So, grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's get into it. It all started on a regular evening at home. I was looking for my older brother, who always had a knack for hiding from me whenever we played. Our house was newly built. My parents had it constructed from scratch, and no one had lived there before. But sometimes, it felt off, like something unseen was lingering in the air, just beyond the edge of perception. That night, I searched everywhere inside but couldn't find my brother. Thinking he might be playing a trick on me, I decided to check outside. It was quiet, the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. I walked around to the back of the house and saw a door slightly ajar. My heart skipped a beat. This door was never open. We never used it. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity won. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was heavy, colder than the outside night. It smelled different, stale, as if it had been closed off for years. I moved cautiously through the dimly lit room, my eyes scanning every shadow. Then, I noticed the bathroom door was slightly open. If my brother was anywhere, it had to be there. I crept forward, the floor creaking under my weight, leaving the bathroom door open just a crack. I peeked inside. That's when I saw them, two enormous, glowing white eyes staring directly at me from the corner of the room. My breath caught in my throat. My body froze in place. I forced myself to believe it was my brother trying to scare me. So I smiled, turned fully toward the door, and called out his name. "Gotcha," I said, stepping forward. The door slammed shut right in front of me with such force that it made the walls shake. There was no wind, no draft, nothing that could have done that. My stomach churned, and my legs felt weak. I reached out with trembling hands and yanked the door open. Nothing. The room was empty. I stumbled back, my heart racing like a drum in my chest. I wanted to scream, to call for someone, but my voice was trapped in my throat. I turned and ran out of the house, not stopping until I reached the front porch. My parents were inside, watching TV, completely unaware of what had just happened. When I told my mom, she laughed it off. "It was just a dream," she said, but I knew better. I had been awake. I had felt the cold air, seen those eyes, heard the slam of the door. My friends believed me, but I never told my dad. Something told me he wouldn't believe me either. The strange occurrences didn't stop there. Over the years, more things happened. Objects moving on their own. Whispers in the night. Doors opening and closing by themselves. The presence in the house was real. And it never left. I spent my childhood living in fear, always waiting for those white eyes to return. One particular night, I woke up to the sound of scratching. It was coming from the walls. A slow, deliberate scrape, like fingernails being dragged across the surface. I sat up, frozen, listening. Then, I heard a whisper. A voice, not one I recognized, was speaking softly from just beyond the wall. The words were unintelligible, but the tone sent shivers down my spine. I reached for the lamp beside my bed and switched it on. The whispering stopped immediately, but the room felt thick with something unseen. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I told my brother about it. He looked at me strangely and admitted that he had been hearing whispers too, coming from inside his closet. That night, we decided to sleep in the same room. We kept the light on, listening carefully, waiting. Around midnight, it happened again. The scratching, the whispers. But this time, the closet door creaked open on its own. We bolted out of the room and ran straight to our parents' room. But as expected, they didn't believe us. "It's just your imagination," Dad said. "There's nothing in this house but us." But we knew better. As the years passed, the activity in the house intensified. Shadows moved in the corners of our vision. Cold spots would appear out of nowhere. Doors would open and close without explanation. And then, there were the dreams. I started having recurring nightmares about the glowing eyes. In the dreams, they were closer than before, watching me from just outside my window. Waiting in the darkness. Sometimes, I saw them peering at me from the foot of my bed. Every time I woke up, my room felt colder than it should have been. One night, I woke up gasping for air, feeling an immense pressure on my chest. It was as if an unseen force was pinning me down. I struggled to move, to breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it was gone. I sat up, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering. I knew it wasn't a dream. Something had been in my room. That was the night I decided I had to leave. I moved out as soon as I was old enough, leaving my childhood home behind. But the memories never faded. To this day, I still think about those glowing eyes, the whispers in the dark, the unseen force that lurked within that house. Some ghost stories fade with time, but this one stayed with me, shaping my fascination with the paranormal. What were those eyes? Why did they appear in my house? I may never know the full truth, but one thing is certain: I was not alone that night. Story 7. You ever move into a new place and right off the bat feel like you weren't alone? Like something was already there, quiet, watchful, and not exactly friendly, but not out to hurt you either? That's exactly how I felt the day I moved into my new house. I've been through some strange stuff in my life, but this one stuck with me. And even now, I get chills just thinking about it. So here's how it all went down. I had just moved into this place a couple of months ago. Nice little house on the edge of town. Had a backyard, a small pool, and even an old wooden shack at the far end that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. I thought it was perfect. Quiet, kind of secluded, just how I liked it. My younger brother Tyler was over helping me unpack that first week. We were hot and sweaty from moving boxes all day, so we decided to jump in the pool and cool off. Just like when we were kids. It was late afternoon. The sun was dipping low, casting that golden light across the water. We were goofing around, splashing, and I happened to glance over toward the fence. And there he was, a little boy, maybe 7, maybe 8, just running along the edge of the yard. He was wearing this plain white shirt and brown shorts. Real old school looking. Clothes didn't look right for this day and age. But what really got me was how fast he disappeared. I only looked away for a second. And when I turned back, he was gone. Not a trace. No footsteps in the dirt. No splash if he jumped in. Just gone. I didn't say a word to Tyler. Didn't want him to think I was losing it. But deep down, I knew what I saw. And it didn't feel like a living child. 2 weeks later, I had a couple of friends over, Nate and Sarah. We were out back, enjoying a few beers, just talking about work, life, whatever. Sarah suddenly stops mid-sentence and goes pale. "Did y'all see that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There was a little boy. He just ran by." I didn't say anything, just looked at Nate, and he nodded slowly. "I saw him too," he said. "Short kid, looked right at me and then ran off." That's when I told them everything about what I'd seen the day Tyler and I were in the pool. About how the house next door was empty. About how no one should be able to get into the backyard unless they came through the house. Sarah, who's always been kind of tuned into spiritual stuff, said we should check out the shack out back. Said she was getting a weird vibe from it. So the three of us went over there the next afternoon. The shack was falling apart, full of cobwebs and dust. Old tools, rusted shelves, broken stuff piled in the corners. And there, sitting on a shelf with no plug in sight, was this old microwave. Looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Nate joked, "What, you think the ghost's gonna heat up a hot pocket?" We laughed, but then the microwave lit up. The timer started turning. The inside light flickered, and then came the noise, a soft hum, followed by a high-pitched whine, like static and crying all mixed together. Then the scream, piercing, like a little boy crying out for help. We didn't stick around. We ran, all the way back to the house. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, just thinking. And then I felt it, that cold air again. Freezing cold, like the temperature dropped 20 degrees. I started talking out loud. Said, "If you're here, kid, I want to help. You don't have to be scared." I didn't hear anything, but something sat down beside me. I swear to you, the cushion sank like someone was sitting there. I looked, but no one was there. After that, I started seeing him more often. Just flashes, like catching movement in the corner of your eye. Always that same sad look. Never said a word, but I could feel it. The sorrow, the weight, like he was stuck in some kind of loop. Trying to reach out but not knowing how. One night, I lit a candle and left it on the porch. Some folks say that helps spirits find peace. I don't know if it worked. But that night I dreamt of the boy. He was standing at the edge of the pool, crying. I walked up and asked him what was wrong. He said, "I can't find my mom." I woke up in tears. A couple of days later, I found something in the shack I hadn't seen before. An old photograph, wedged behind a broken board. It showed a little boy, maybe the same one, standing next to a woman in front of what looked like my house, only older. The house had been rebuilt, but it was the same property. That's when it hit me. He probably lived here once. Maybe died here. Maybe his mom did too. Who knows? Now, that wasn't the only strange thing I experienced. A few months before I moved in, I was staying at my sister's place for a bit. Just a short visit. One morning, I woke up early to finish some online work. After I submitted everything, I laid back down for a quick nap. That's when it happened. I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. It felt like something heavy was sitting on my chest, pressing me into the mattress. And then I saw it. A shadow figure at the foot of the bed. Not tall, but thick, dense, like smoke and hate wrapped into one. It slowly moved toward me. My heart pounded, but I couldn't scream. I couldn't do a damn thing. Then, it leaned over, real close, and I swear I felt it enter me, like a cold breath being forced into my lungs. But not air, something else, something wrong. Suddenly, everything changed. I wasn't in my room anymore. It was dark, silent, like being buried underground, but I could still think, still feel. I don't know how long I was there. Could have been seconds, felt like forever. And then I snapped back. Just like that, sat up, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. That shadow? I never saw it again. But every now and then, right as I wake up, I feel that weight again. Like it's still watching, still waiting. I don't know if the two things are connected, the boy and the shadow. Maybe, maybe not, but ever since both those things happened, my life's been different. Like I can sense things now. The cold spots, the flickers, the quiet that doesn't feel empty. One night, after another sighting of the boy, I went to the library and started digging through local history. Turns out, back in the 1950s, there was a fire at a house on this land. A little boy and his mother were listed among the missing. Never found their bodies. The photo I found matched the newspaper clipping almost perfectly. I think the boy's still looking for her. Still stuck here. And maybe whatever that shadow was, it's what took them both. I've tried talking to him more. Lighting candles. Leaving toys by the pool. Once, I left out a toy truck. And the next morning, it had been moved halfway across the yard. I know Tyler didn't do it. He hadn't been over. So I keep trying. I don't want to be scared of him. I just want to help. After all this, I don't see the world the same. Ghosts aren't just scary stories you tell around a fire. They're real, or at least, something is. And sometimes, they're not angry. They're just broken, lost, waiting for someone to notice. That little boy? I hope he finds peace. And if there's a way to help him get there, I'll keep trying. As for the shadow, I don't know what it wanted. I hope I never find out. But if I ever feel it again, this time, I won't be afraid. Because now I know, some things don't leave. They linger. And maybe, just maybe, we're not supposed to forget them. Story 8. You know, there are some nights that stick with you forever. Nights where something just feels off. The air gets still. The crickets seem to hush for a moment. And you swear the shadows grow a little longer. This story I'm about to tell y'all happened a long time ago. When I was just a kid, I was stayin' at my Aunt Martha's old farmhouse, way out in the sticks of Georgia. Where the stars shine bright and the nights can get mighty quiet, almost too quiet. If you ask me, it was one of them warm, sticky nights in mid-July, where the only relief came from the small breeze creepin' through the open window. I was layin' in bed with my cousin Lila. We shared the big old feather mattress in the guest room, right beneath the window that looked out into the back pasture. The crickets were chirpin', and lightning bugs danced in the dark like little floatin' stars. I remember starin' out that window, tryin' to count 'em, just lettin' my mind wander. Then, all of a sudden, the peace broke. I heard footsteps, not outside, not down the hall, but above us, up in the loft. Now, let me paint you a picture real quick. That loft was more like a crawl space above the bedrooms, used for storin' old boxes and forgotten things. It didn't have a proper floor, just some planks layin' across beams. Nobody ever went up there at night, and there sure wasn't supposed to be anybody up there. But I heard it, clear as day. Step, step, creak, step. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone was talkin' their sweet time. I didn't say nothin' at first, just held my breath and listened. The boards creaked under the weight. Then the steps paused, right above our heads. Then, nothin'. Next thing I knew, I must have drifted off, 'cause the sun was peekin' through the curtains. Lila and I were playin' with our dolls on the floor when I told her about what I heard. She went quiet for a second, then looked up at me and said, "I've heard it too, lots of times. That's why I always try to fall asleep quick, before it starts." Well, you can imagine I didn't take that too lightly. We made ourselves a little plan. That night, we were gonna stay awake and find out what's been walkin' in that loft. Now, I ain't sayin' we were brave. Just curious, dumb, childish curious. But that night turned into a memory neither of us would ever forget. We went to bed as usual, but instead of noddin' off, we whispered under the covers, sharin' theories like it was some kinda ghost hunt. Maybe it was a raccoon. Maybe Uncle Dale hid something up there. Maybe, and this was my favorite idea at the time, it was the ghost of Great-Grandpa Thomas, lookin' for his lost gold watch. Midnight came and went. We started gettin' drowsy, but then, just past 2 a.m., we heard it. Step, creak, step. I pinched Lila. She pinched me back. The footsteps were movin', same slow pace, right above us again. We lay still, tryin' not to breathe too loud. The sound got closer, so close it felt like whatever it was could hear our hearts poundin'. Then, it stopped. I peeked out from under the covers. Didn't see nothin', just shadows. Lila was stiff as a board next to me. Come mornin', she told me she saw a figure standin' near the window. Said it looked like an old man, kinda hunched, with somethin' shimmerin' in his hand. She thought it might have been a watch. We didn't tell Aunt Martha. Figured she wouldn't believe us. But from that night on, we never stayed in that room again. We switched to the pull-out sofa in the living room. Years later, I went back to visit after Aunt Martha passed. The house felt different, emptier, colder. I found myself wandering up to that loft. The ladder creaked under my weight. Dust hung in the air. There wasn't much up there but old trunks and yellowed newspapers. But in the far corner, buried under a moth-eaten quilt, I found an old gold pocket watch. It wasn't tickin', but when I opened it, I saw a name etched inside, Thomas C. I just about dropped it. Now, I ain't tryin' to convince nobody to believe in ghosts. That's up to you. But for me, I know what I heard. And Lila knew what she saw. Sometimes, the ones who came before us ain't ready to leave just yet. Maybe they're waiting on something. Maybe they're just walking the halls of memory, trying not to be forgotten. Whatever the reason, that summer night taught me one thing: the past has footsteps. And sometimes, if you listen real close, you can still hear him. This story still makes my skin crawl a little when I think back on it. Maybe it was just an old house settling. Maybe Lila and I let our imagination run wild. But I don't think so. Too many things lined up for it to just be coincidence. The truth is, there are things out there we can't explain. And some of them might be closer than we think. All I know is, ever since that night, I never take silence for granted. So if you ever find yourself laying awake in an old house, and you hear steps where there shouldn't be any, just remember: not all visitors knock on the door. Thanks for listening. Story 9. You know, there's something about Christmas time that always feels a little magical. Maybe it's the lights, the music, the warm feelings, or the way people seem to be just a bit kinder. But sometimes, just sometimes, that magic feels different, a little colder, a little quieter, like something, or someone, is there, watching. And that's exactly what happened to me one winter evening not too long ago. It was a lazy December afternoon. Not long before Christmas, I was home alone, stretched out on my bed, flipping through a book just to kill time. My name's Riley, by the way. I live in a small town called Meadowbrook, quiet place. New houses, good neighbors. The house we lived in was freshly built. No one had ever lived there before us. You'd think that would mean no ghosts, right? Yeah, I thought so too. That day was cold, not snowy, just one of those cloudy, gray days where the wind sounds like it's got a voice of its own. I was in my room with the door open, legs propped up, book resting on my knees. Everything was quiet, except for the faint hum of the central heating and the occasional creak of the house settling. Then, out of nowhere, I got this strange feeling. Like something inside me whispered, "Look at the door." Not out loud, just that kind of feeling that hits your gut. So, I looked, and standing right there, in the doorway, was a figure, not solid, not exactly clear, but definitely there, white, glowing, almost. It didn't move, it didn't speak, it just stared. I froze. I didn't even scream. My heart was pounding like a drum. And all I could do was squeeze my eyes shut like a little kid. Maybe I thought it'd go away. Maybe I hoped I was dreaming. A few seconds passed, maybe more. When I opened my eyes again, it was still there, just for a moment. Then, like it realized I was watching, it slowly turned and glided to the right, toward the hallway that led to the bathroom in my little sister's room. I didn't hear footsteps. It didn't make a sound. Just gone. I laid there, completely still, my book forgotten. I didn't have the guts to go check. Not right away. I must have waited 15-20 minutes before I even got up. When I did, the hallway was empty. Bathroom light was off. My sister's room untouched. Nothing was there. Later that night, I kept the lights on. Not just in my room, but in the hallway too. I even left the TV playing something lighthearted, cartoons or a sitcom. I can't remember anything to drown out the silence. I kept glancing at the door every few minutes, half expecting something to be there. But nothing came back. At least, not that night. I didn't say anything at first. I figured maybe I was tired. Maybe it was my eyes playing tricks. But a few days later, we were sitting around the living room, me, my mom, and my aunt, and somehow the topic of weird stuff came up. That's when my aunt said it, casual as ever. "You know, I thought I saw something the other night. A white figure, right in the hallway. I figured it was just some kind of Christmas angel or something." I just stared at her. "Wait, when?" "Couple nights ago," she said. "Near midnight, maybe." My mom nodded. "I've seen it too," she said. "I thought it was part of a dream. But now I'm not so sure." And that's when the hair on my arms stood up. 3 people, 3 separate sightings, all around the same time. Same figure, same hallway. From that point on, I started paying attention, not just to the house, but to how I felt. There were times I'd walk down the hallway and feel this chill, like the air dropped 10 degrees. Or I'd hear a creak when nobody was upstairs. Little things, but enough. One evening, I thought I heard whispering. Nothing clear, just soft, low murmurs, like someone having a conversation in the next room. But everyone else was out. I walked through the house, calling out names, but no one answered. The moment I stepped into the hallway, it stopped, dead silent. No hum, no whispers. I stood there, heart thumping, then walked back to my room, this time shutting the door completely. One night, I decided to leave my phone recording while I slept. I propped it up on my nightstand, facing the door. The next morning, I played it back. For hours, there was nothing but silence. Until about 3:17 a.m., when the door creaked open by itself. I watched that clip over and over. No one in the frame. No wind. No pets. Just the door, slowly opening. That's when I stopped sleeping with it fully shut. I even talked to a friend at school about it. Real quiet like. He told me to sprinkle salt by the door and leave a light on during the night. I don't know if it helped, but I did it anyway. Just in case. Maybe part of me needed to do something, anything, that gave me a little sense of control. It's been a few months since then. The sightings stopped after Christmas passed. Almost like whatever it was only came during that time. Some people might say it was just a guardian spirit, or maybe a visitor from the other side checking in for the holidays. I'm not sure what it was, but I know what I saw. And if you ever find yourself in a quiet house, reading a book by yourself, and you get that feeling to look at the door, maybe think twice. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll see something too. Looking back, I don't think it was evil. It never tried to hurt me. It didn't even come close. It just watched, like it was curious, like it had been there before. Maybe tied to something about that time of year, memories, emotions, who knows. Some folks might call it a Christmas angel, like my aunt said. Others might call it a ghost. Me? I think some things just don't have a name. And that's okay, because sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones that chase you. They're the ones that stand in the doorway, silent, waiting, and watching. And if it ever returns again, next Christmas or any other night, maybe this time, I'll be ready to ask who, or what, it really is. Story 10. You ever had that feeling? Late at night, when everything's quiet, but something just feels off. Like you're not alone even when you should be? Yeah, me too. What I'm about to tell y'all ain't no bedtime story. This is real, Happened right under the roof I sleep in every night. So, grab a blanket, dim the lights if you dare, and listen close, 'cause this one's got chills crawling all over it. I grew up in a small town called Brookhaven, just outside of Georgia. Real quiet place, nothing fancy, where everybody knows everybody. My family's house was an old 2-story built back in the 50s. With creaky floorboards and a big front porch that always seemed to groan louder than it should. It's the kinda house that has personality, you know? But what we didn't know when we moved in was that it also had company. Now, I ain't one to jump to conclusions or go yellin' about ghosts and such. But when stuff keeps happenin' night after night, it's hard not to start connectin' the dots. It started subtle. My little sister, Mia, she had this box of toys she kept in the living room. Sometimes we'd find her favorite toy truck sittin' in the hallway or the kitchen when nobody had touched it. We thought maybe the dog dragged it around. But then things started gettin' weird. One night, I was in bed, tryin' to get some sleep after a long shift. I work nights sometimes, so I was dead tired. I had just closed my eyes when I felt a shake, not like an earthquake or nothin', but like someone grabbed the edge of the bed and gave it a good jolt. I sat up, heart poundin', lookin' around. Nothin' there. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the night light in the corner. That night light, by the way, was for my nephew, Tyler. He's 7, and when he sleeps over, he gets scared of the dark. That night, though, it wasn't him sleepin' over, it was just me. The light lit up the whole room in a soft glow. But then, something happened I still can't explain. The light, it just faded. Not all at once, slowly, like someone was covering it with a blanket or their hand. The room went pitch black for a second. Then the light came back like nothing happened. I sat there, frozen. I knew I was alone. Over the next few weeks, more things started happening. Whispers in the hallway, soft footsteps upstairs when nobody was home. The sound of toys clinking together like someone was playing with them. Mia said she heard someone giggling in the hallway outside her room. I didn't want to scare her, so I told her it was just the house settling. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One night, I decided to stay up late, sitting in the dark living room with a flashlight and my phone, trying to catch whatever was messin' with us. It was around 2:30 in the morning when I heard it, soft shufflin' steps in the hallway. I turned on the flashlight, heart beatin' out of my chest, and saw the shadow of a small figure movin' past the doorway. I bolted out of that chair and ran to the hallway. But it was empty. Nothing. I checked every room, all the windows locked. I went back to the living room and sat down, feeling that cold chill in the air. That's when I realized it wasn't just some creaky house noises or my imagination. We had a ghost. We later found out, through a friend of my mom's who used to live down the street, that a boy had died in this house. His name was Caleb. He was 12 years old. Died in the early 80s from an accident in the attic. Nobody really talked about it. And honestly, most folks around here like to sweep things like that under the rug. But when my mom heard the name, she got real quiet. See, one day, my mom had gone up into the attic looking for an old suitcase. She came back down pale as a sheet. Said she felt someone tug at her coat while she was up there. Thought it was just her imagination, till Mia came crying down the stairs that same night, saying a boy was sitting at the end of her bed, staring at her. I ain't gonna lie, I started losing sleep. My bed kept shaking. I started hearing whistling at night. At first, I thought it was the wind. But it always came from inside the house. I even started hearing little knocking sounds on my door at 3 a.m. sharp. Always 3 a.m. Eventually, I got desperate enough to try talking to him. I borrowed a friend's old Ouija board. Yeah, I know, not the best idea, but I had to try something. One night, I lit a few candles, sat in the kitchen, and started asking questions. The planchette moved real slow at first, then spelled out CALEB. I asked him how old he was. It moved to 1 to 2. I asked if he died in this house. It moved to YES. I asked if he was the one moving the toys. YES. Then I asked if he meant us harm. The planchette paused, then slid over to NO. That was the first night I didn't feel scared. Just sad. Since then, I've seen him a couple more times, just out of the corner of my eye. Pale skin, short hair, wearing an old hoodie. He don't do much now. Just kinda lingers. But Mia swears he still plays with her toys. And sometimes, late at night, the whistling comes back. He ain't left us, but I don't think he wants to. Some folks don't believe in ghosts. That's fine. But when you've lived with one, when you've heard the steps, seen the shadows, felt your bed shake when nobody's there, well, you start looking at things a little different. I think Caleb just wants to be remembered. And maybe, just maybe, he's found a family that won't forget him. If y'all liked this story, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give the video a thumbs up. And share it with someone who loves a good ghost tale. This was the last story in this series. But I promise, there's plenty more chills where that came from. Thanks for listening, and I'll see y'all real soon, in the next haunting. Take care, and don't forget to leave a light on tonight.